everybody, it's Jama Malmy, and today I am creating a love scrapbook layout. This is the creative design team's January collaboration on Valentine's ideas, and we're all going to share all sorts of different Valentine's ideas, whatever the team member decides they want to create, to give you some ideas for the upcoming holiday. So today I am going to be scrapbooking one of these photos. I'm not sure which one, and truth be told, they actually are not Valentine's photos, but they are love photos, and that's what I'm going to be focusing on. I pulled out the Jingle Joy collection, which if you look here, it looks like a Christmas collection, and you know, it kind of is, but you turn over all of the Christmas looking papers and all of a sudden you have a black and white palette. And you can add some pink cardstock to give it a pink, black, and white look. Or you can add some red and black cardstock and make it more of a red look. So this is such a versatile pack, and you've even got the little hearts here to further that design element of the hearts. So I pulled out some dies that I might use. This is one of my all-time favorite dies. It's been long retired, but it creates just an outline of a heart. And then of course you get that inside as well. So I may use those. I've got some stitched hearts. And then not sure what else I'll use, but just pulled some other dies that might be useful. This little mini envelope, I thought it might be cute to have some hearts coming out of there. So I also pulled my heart. This is to make shaker cards, but you can also just punch out these tiny little hearts, which could be cute. This heart background die, which creates an amazing background for cards or layouts, but there's also some good various sizes of hearts in here that I can use also coming out of this envelope or scattered around the layout. Another all-time favorite border die that creates little tiny hearts and a little tiny border with little hearts in it. And then this one is still available. This is the Fancy Borders Thin Cuts, and this border has some hearts on here. And just to give you an idea of what that looks like once it's cut, it cuts one side. So it just cuts this top side with the scallop and the little hearts in there. And so that looks super cute. And this one I already had cut from another project I didn't use. So I may try to work that in. Let's go ahead and get started, and we'll see which direction I head.
I decided to use the photo of my daughter with our beloved dog who passed away in 2017, so it makes me happy to look back at these photos, happy and sad. So I decided to use a grid background, and I sort of had that started and thought it would be fun to do some stenciling on one of the squares. I don't end up using this on the layout actually, but I do end up making 4 bonus cards that I'm going to show at the end of this video, so be sure to stay tuned for those, using all of the elements that are left over from the layout that I didn't use and used in other ways. So they're really fun cards. But what I did was I started with the really light pink Distress Oxide ink, and then I moved the stencil and went over it with the darker pink. I believe this is Picked Raspberry. And I didn't like it in that spot, and also didn't like that the Picked Raspberry didn't quite match the raspberry cardstock I had. So I thought I would try it on a white background, and again started with the light pink Tattered Rose and went on to a more medium pink with the Worn Lipstick. I put that on in another spot, and then I moved it a second time, so I did a third layer that was a lighter layer in the Worn Lipstick, and then right over that third layer I put stickles as well. So the stickles is going over the pink layer. This is the regular stickles, not the glitter gel, but it works well on a stencil. You just squirt it out like you saw me do there, and it looks really cute. So you'll see here how beautiful that background looks, but I didn't like it on my layout. So I ended up going back to just the patterned paper. I wanted that sort of the offset look that you have from just one photo, and then the 3 black and white patterns going around it. So I'm speeding this up a little bit, but I wanted to keep this process in because I added a lot of die cuts and I did a lot of layering, and I wanted to show you how I did that because this is a really good way to add dimension and interest to your layout. And so I clustered up a whole bunch of hearts and flowers. I had flowers laying in a bowl I keep on my desk from leftover projects. Some of them are die cuts, some of them are Cricut cuts. The flower on the left that is the black and white with the glitter center is actually a stamped image that I had cut out for another project and didn't use. But as I'm doing this, I'm just kind of tucking things in and layering things up, and but I have them in groups of 3. So you can see that each cluster follows the rule of the visual triangle. So I've got 3 clusters, even though there's lots of embellishments there. And I used that background die that I showed you in the beginning on a scrap piece of glitter paper because I wanted to add some glitter hearts. And so you saw that you don't need to add a piece of paper behind the entire background die. You can just cover part of the background die with the paper and still get lots of hearts out of it. There's some little itty bitty hearts, some bigger, medium, and I think there's 4 sizes of hearts in that die. So that's where I got a lot of the hearts, as well as the stitched hearts and those outline hearts. So now I'm going to start gluing things down and assembling the background. So I didn't want to waste any of that background paper. So I gutted out all but an inch, and then I glued on this second layer. There's 3 layers total. And once I started doing this, I added it to my Versamat so I could line it up just right. And I knew I had a 1/2 inch border around the whole thing. I'm going to gut out the raspberry cardstock as well, but not as much because I want more stability with this piece. So I went in, I didn't measure, but I just went in more than I needed to so that I had a little bit of that extra stability going around the edge as well. And but that saves some more cardstock, and then I could layer on that final white piece there. I could have waited to do this till later, especially since I added stenciling later onto that white piece, but I didn't know I would be doing that, so it all works out in the end. So now I'm cutting out my title. It says, "I love you," and I'm doing that onto black glitter paper and adding that onto one of the squares. I wasn't exactly sure where I wanted it, and I couldn't fit YOU, so I just made it U. And then later also decided that I didn't want the I in there. So you'll see over off to the side, I have the I, O, and Y left over, and I'm going to be using those in the cards later, so I wanted to be sure to point that out to you. So adding lots of various little hearts still. I'm using the little tiny hearts almost as little embellishments, like in the place of gems or dots like you would use. I do end up adding those later at the end as well, but the hearts sort of take that place also. So now I'm going to start gluing things down, and you're not going to watch this whole process. I just wanted to kind of show you a little bit of it so you can see the glue I use and sort of how I do that. I try to keep things in place as much as I can and start gluing down from the bottom up so that I can keep everything exactly how I had placed it. It ends up just a little bit off, but it all works out in the end. So once I get everything all glued down here, I wanted to add a little bit of splatters because, you know, I can't have any background without splatters. So I pulled out my Lagoon shimmer brush, and I also pulled out my clear shimmer brush. I wasn't sure which one I wanted to use, so I tested out the 2 colors. The Lagoon shimmer brush is a little darker than using my clear shimmer brush and dipping it in the Lagoon ink. So I decided to go this route because I wanted it a little lighter. And I wanted the blue because I have that blue background in my photo, and I wanted to scatter that a little more throughout the page to make it, I guess, not quite so Valentine-y, but also to spread that color throughout so that it was evenly spaced around the page. And I also did a few black splatters. And that wasn't quite enough for me, so I wanted to add a little more pizzazz to the background. I pulled out that same hearts stencil that I used earlier and covered the background more subtly than inking. I wanted just a glitter layer. So this, I used some Nouveau glitter paste. This is definitely more of a paste than a gel. The Stickles glitter gel which I've used in the past, is more jelly, and this is definitely more pasty. So it's just a little bit of a different consistency, but this one is very glittery. And then ended up adding the squares down. I wanted to show you, I put a little bit of liquid glue around just the corners so that it would be sure to stick down on that glittered background. Then I dug deep into my stash and pulled out some very old embellishments. I love doing this. I love pulling out of my stash and using things that I have. And I had a lot of black chipboard glittery elements that I used. And I decided to add another little cluster here. And you may think that this is going to be a fourth cluster, and it kind of is, but I felt that it still worked because it's close enough to that cluster that's underneath it, so it sort of feels like that's one bigger cluster, and it still felt balanced to me. So don't feel like you have to stay tight within the clusters that you do. You can sort of like sprawl them out, spread them out, and still make it work. Then I added some black enamel dots, and another tip here, adding dots and embellishments that are smaller like this, is to keep them sort of contained and related to the clusters that you already have. If you span them out across the whole page, more kind of more scattered and not quite with the clusters, then it does look a little more random, and keeping them close to the clusters helps to keep them related to the clusters. I did add a little more teal with some teal dots, just a few of them. I tucked that one under the arrow. That's a little tip to tuck a bigger embellishment under some things if you don't want that whole thing showing. And you can see the close-up background really well, and I think that this just turned out so fun. Here's some still shots for you where you can see a little bit more detail. I just love using up die cuts that I have and stuff from my stash like that XOXO, and next month's collaboration is going to be all on using up our stash. Here are the bonus cards as promised. That beautiful background looks so pretty, and I just cut out another heart and U to create the sentiment on there. This one is a little tiny one with a bunch of hearts layered up on it. Love how that looks. And here is that heart background, the background die that I inlaid a bunch of different hearts in. And my all-time favorite is this slimline card. I love those little mini envelopes, which, by the way, that die is such a great price point, and all of those colorful flowers or hearts coming out of there. So I hope that these inspired you, and you have a whole bunch of more inspiration coming up from ERIN tomorrow, and then Lisa the next day, and Chelsea is our brand new design team member. We are so excited to have her on the team now and can't wait to see what she creates. If you missed any of the projects from Andrea, Julie, Katie, or Carrie, then they are linked down in my description below, as well as all of the supplies that I used. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.